This is part of the Manitoba Integrated Violent Offender Apprehension Unit. Inspector Jennifer McKinnon says the goal is to get information to the public fast.
Offenders who find themselves on this list are responsible for homicides, aggravated assaults, firearms offenses, and crimes that quite frankly caused immeasurable suffering and hardship. And that's how they've become the focus of this unit.
In the first 3 quarters of 2024, the Manitoba Integrated Violent Offender Apprehension Unit has arrested 264 violent offenders, conducted 594 warrant checks, and knocked on 1,203 doors. RCMP Major Crimes Inspector Sean Pike explains why social media attention works.
We've had occasions where a parent will drive a wanted individual to the detachment so that they can turn themselves in. We've also had an individual walk into one of our detachments, show our officers on their phone the RCMP Facebook page, asking to be arrested so that the post of them can be taken down.
Minister of Justice Matt Wiebe says the province will continue to invest $3 million a year to this unit.
The unit targets people who are terrorizing Manitobans and those who are exploiting our most vulnerable citizens.
Violent crime in Winnipeg in 2023 spiked, according to the latest numbers from the Winnipeg Police Annual Report. Leaders hope Manitoba's most wanted list will make people in the neighborhoods feel safer. Zubina Ahmed, CBC News, Winnipeg.
There's a sign in the window. This 7-Eleven on Ellis Avenue is closed. So is this one on McPhillips. The two were on a list of 10 Winnipeg 7-Eleven stores shared with City Councillors Ross Eady and Vivian Santos in August. At the time, 7-Eleven told them crime, including theft and violence, were putting them at risk of closing.
It's very concerning when we see retailers, making decisions that they believe they have to make to close their doors because of the amount of theft that they're facing.
At least 2 other 7-Elevens not on the list have also closed, including this one on McPhillips and this one on Pembina. 7-Eleven could not be reached for comment about why the stores shut their doors. Councillor Ross Eady says he hasn't talked to anyone from the company recently, but says concerns need addressing.
This kind of theft is bad at all retail stores right now.
The province launched a pilot retail anti-theft initiative earlier this year, paying officers overtime in areas hit hard by retail crime like Osborne Village, the Exchange District, and the West End. Eady wants to see it expand to other areas. The mayor wants it made permanent. Justice Minister Matt Wiebe says the province is looking at the possibilities.
And what we're talking about is making this initiative, some of the elements of this initiative permanent going forward. And really what that means is we're going to be bringing on new officers that are funded by the province of Manitoba that will, build off of some of the successes we saw with the retail crime initiative.
Wiebe says they're going to keep listening to retailers. Just last week, a summit looking at retail crime was held in Winnipeg. Wiebe says 7-Eleven was one of the sponsors. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Andrew Marquis is best known as the developer of the Parker lands in Winnipeg. Between 2020 and 2023, he worked as a consultant and advisor for Peguis First Nation, working on a debt repayment plan, consulting on housing shortages related to flooding, and using treaty land entitlement funds to purchase real estate assets. In a statement of claim filed on September 27th, Peguis alleges Marquis, companies he controls, and a company owned by his wife failed to act in the best interests of the band and benefited financially from breaches of duty. In the claim, Peguis alleges Marquis has consistently misused his power and discretion as a fiduciary to enrich himself to the detriment of Peguis. According to the claim, Marquis had the Peguis First Nation Real Estate Trust purchase this former golf course in East St. Paul because he was interested in developing it into housing, according to the claim. Peguis claims Marquis directed the real estate trust to agree to a $5.5 million loan from a company owned by Marquis's wife. That loan now has an interest rate of 9.2%, according to the claim. Peguis also claims Marquis directed the real estate trust to buy and sell this vacant land along Wellington Crescent in Winnipeg. According to the claim, the province sold this land to Peguis on the basis it would be added to its reserve lands. Peguis claims a subsequent sale to a private developer breached the terms of the purchase and the treaty land entitlement agreement. In the claim, Peguis alleges Marquis had the ability to unilaterally exercise his power and discretion in a manner that affected Peguis's legal, economic, and practical interests. Peguis was vulnerable to and at the mercy of Marquis's exercises of discretion and power. In a statement, Marquis called the claim baseless, without merit, and legally flawed. The notion that I, or anyone else for that matter, had total control of all of Peguis's financial, legal, and other matters is pure fiction. Marquis called the claim an attempt by Peguis to distract from its inability to resolve a $172 million lawsuit from a receiver for a former lender and a federal court challenge of its 2023 election launched by former Chief Glenn Hudson against current Chief Stan Bird.
None of the allegations made by Peguis have been proven in court. No statement of defense has been filed. Marquis says he will immediately move towards striking the claims. Bart Lekivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Winnipeg firefighters have struggled to keep up with the number of vacant building fires. Last year, the city started billing for the cost of sending crews to battle the blazes. But now the fire department says those fees may have done more harm than good. Last year, the city issued a total of $1.15 million worth of fees for fires in vacant buildings. So far, they've collected nearly $78,500. In some cases, the high fees may have discouraged property owners from making repairs, leading to repeat fires. City staff recommend lowering the fees in the hope more owners will pay up. Mayor Scott Gillingham says he's open to changes.
The goal is to get the result we need, and the result we need is fewer vacant and derelict properties, and those properties turned into developed properties.
The city assesses fees based on the number of fire trucks and other equipment responding. The average fee per property is $26,000, with the highest bill for $138,000. The city recommends a new set of fees, starting at $5,000 for the first fire, up to $20,000 for the fourth and subsequent fires. The William White neighborhood has some of the highest numbers of vacant building fires. Neighborhood Association President Darrell Warren doesn't support lowering the fees.
To the people in the neighborhood, they would probably see the city as being weak. And what I mean by that is the city being weak is they're backing down from these guys.
The city would also write off about $900,000 worth of fees issued last year. The service stopped issuing new fees in December after hearing complaints from property owners. Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Chief Christian Schmidt says in some cases, owners were in the midst of making repairs when a repeat fire occurred.
We need to be cognizant of that, and we don't want to be contributing to some of the problems. We want to be helping to resolve some of the issues in the city.
The city also recommends introducing a new process to waive fees for property owners in some circumstances. The Executive Policy Committee will debate the proposed changes next week. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Laura Chase rents a unit in a fourplex house built in the 1960s, at a time when asbestos was widely used in a range of building materials.
The water damage on the ceiling had been right about there.
In the past 2 years, the Residential Tenancies Branch ordered her landlord to make various repairs, such as replacing drywall that had water damage, fixing the bathtub faucet, and replacing windows. In 2023, the property manager sent a representative to get samples for asbestos testing. The results came back negative in drywall plaster in the bedrooms and beside the kitchen window, and negative in fiberglass insulation.
Based upon the first tests that were done, that were apparently negative, they went ahead and they started doing work.
Chase became suspicious about the test results, so she hired a testing company. One of the samples came back positive for asbestos in the drywall joint compound on the bathroom ceiling. She later got testing done for the drywall joint compound in the bedroom, and it was also positive for asbestos.
So after the windows were replaced and before the bathroom was renovated, I did the testing, and I found the results were indeed positive. And that was alarming because 3 windows had been replaced without any precautions.
Asbestos is a carcinogenic material, and if it becomes airborne and is inhaled, it can cause fatal illnesses such as mesothelioma and asbestosis. Canada has banned the use of asbestos-containing materials, but they were widely used in construction materials until about 1990. This year, British Columbia became Canada's first province to have a law that requires licensing of employers doing asbestos abatement work and certification of workers who do the job, including sampling and testing. Laura Chase says Manitoba should do the same.
Clearly, the current situation is unsafe. It was unsafe in my case, and the fact that there's so little accountability because there is no license. A person can't lose a license that they don't have in the first place. So how can there be any kind of accountability in a system like this?
The province says that's being evaluated in a review of the Workplace Safety and Health Act, with recommendations expected in early 2025. CBC News contacted the property manager for Chase's house about the asbestos test results, but a spokesperson declined to discuss the case. When Chase decided to get her own asbestos testing done rather than rely on the property managers, she contacted Winnipeg firm J&D Environmental to get the samples for testing.
What you're showing us here is actually an incredibly common issue.
Danielle Kolba is founder and president of J&D Environmental, as well as Duracan Laboratory Group. He has about 20 years' experience in asbestos work and consulting.
You get false negatives quite often on sites, and this is where you want competent people or consulting firms that actually know how to collect the sample, know where those samples should be collected from, and get you the most authentic data possible to determine if there's asbestos in it.
Kolba says it's important to make sure the sample collection for asbestos testing is always done by an independent third-party company rather than by the contractor who will be doing the renovation work. Vera-Lynn Kubinek, CBC News, Winnipeg.
October is Women's History Month. It's a time to honor and celebrate notable women and their achievements. And throughout this month, we're going to introduce you to women who are breaking barriers and helping ensure this province is a little better off. This woman is a passionate champion of Manitoba's creative and cultural sector. Carol Vivier joins me now. Hi, Carol.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Well, Carol, you spent 3 decades as the CEO and film commissioner for Manitoba Film and Music. Manitoba would quite literally not be what it is, this industry, without you. At the helm, you were trying to sell Manitoba to the world. What did it take to convince Hollywood bigwigs to come shoot in the prairies?
Oh, it's funny because I think about my first trips to Los Angeles, and we didn't even have GPS then. There was nothing. I was using maps, like actual paper maps to work out my routes. But you know what? I think they're very business oriented in Los Angeles, and I think as long as you came across credible and you knew what you were doing, you got a meeting. And so even though at first we certainly didn't have flights, we didn't have a full crew. They still took the meetings, which I really now, and thinking back, really respect that. And then I remember one of the producers I met with said to me, you know what, Carol, you need an incentive to bring us to Winnipeg, to Manitoba. You're just not on the map. And so that's what prompted getting that tax credit. And we were the first Manitoba, the first province in Western Canada to have a tax credit. And it really started that journey. It really helped a lot. So I'm very grateful for having that.
Yeah, you pioneered that film tax credit. As you said, it was the first in Western Canada. That was back in '97. It was really a game changer. So why was that so important to the industry and for you to really help facilitate that to get things going here?
Well, it was really important to the industry because I think you needed to add incentives. And there were incentives in other places, but not as good as the one we ended up with. And it just, it showed them we were serious, we were in the game, and that we really wanted their business. And so for me, it was just a really critical piece of the infrastructure we needed to have here. Along with that first studio that was built, that was really groundbreaking. And, you know, we just continued on, and then we just had great training programs. And even within the tax credit, we had provisions that if we didn't have a crew person available, willing, or able here, they could bring that crew person in from anywhere in the world. But we need to have, if they maximize that, we needed to have 2 Manitobans trained. And so that allowed us to keep building our crew base to where it is today. And like now, it's like crazy how many shoots are going on. I just love it.
It's amazing, and I don't think any Winnipegger can say they haven't seen a film set as they've walked around downtown or in many parts of the city. I love seeing the Christmas movies shooting. So is there a movie or a show that was really like a feather in your cap that you saw when it came here, maybe an actor or actress?
Well, I think there was 2 films that really were breakout for us. One of them was Capote. That was an amazing film. It was won an Academy Award. And then Shall We Dance? Shall We Dance was the largest feature film we ever had here, and it just opened those doors. So I would have to say, for offshore production, those 2 really kind of set the bar for us.
You are also a Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal recipient. You've been honored with both the Order of Manitoba and last week the Order of Canada. What do these accolades mean to you?
Oh, it's kind of like pinch me. It's really amazing. It's quite incredible, rewarded for something that you love doing. And I never expected them. You don't know that you're nominated. So when you get those calls to tell you that you are now a recipient, it really quite literally knocks you off your socks. So I'm very grateful for being honored this way. I never expected it, and I'm really flattered and honored.
Well, Carol, you are one of our women's superstars this month. And I have you here in just a few words and seconds. What would you tell somebody that wants to go into this same field, or your younger self looking back on this?
Oh, to my younger self, I would just say, do what you did. Don't be afraid. Take those risks. When something's presented to you, that's a career move or an opportunity, don't be afraid to do it. Just take those risks, take those chances. It'll always pay off. As long as you're passionate and committed to what you're doing, people will respond to you. And it has to come from your heart, and it has to be sincere, and people know that. So as long as you're doing that, just keep doing what you're doing. It'll happen.
Wise words. Carol, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Jackie Tuda has been working with oil and acrylic paint since she was 13. All of her work is inspired by her Ojibwe history and culture. In recent weeks, she's been seeing her designs on orange shirts and being sold without her permission. She's noticed this happening, especially in the lead up to the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, also known as Orange Shirt Day.
They don't credit me. What mainly happens is they're making profit off the trauma of Indian residential schools. Like, they don't really know the full story. They just know that it's a good time to sell t-shirts.
Travers says she found 2 ads on Facebook selling her stolen designs. She says she watermarks all her art that she posts online.
Either they remove the watermark, or they got the first image from 5 years ago and they just put something over the circle and put a logo in there, Every Child Matters.
She says she's tried contacting them, but they didn't respond.
It's stolen artwork, or it's this artist's work and that artist never gave permission. You know, they're just like, they don't care.
Julia Rickman, lawyer at Fillmore Riley, says artists have the right to prevent anyone from using their work. She says there are various ways to protect their art.
Artists should, when they are posting their arts online, to put a copyright notice on there. That won't prevent infringement, but it just adds that extra bit of information to the public that you are claiming copyright, where you put the copyright sign, your name, the year, and that all rights are reserved.
Rickman says artists should also educate the audience about the copyright and also if someone is using the art without permission. Zubina Ahmed, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Debbie Ross has been living in this hotel room for months.
This is it.
With just a few cherished possessions like her husband's ashes and her cats. But the rest of her belongings, such as her bed and other furniture, is still here at Birchwood Terrace, unused until Ross and her fellow tenants get the green light to move back in.
And if people think that we are having a good time in here, you've got to give your head a shake. I'm not milking the system. I just cannot afford to go and move my stuff out.
Tenants were forced to vacate with just 8 hours' notice after a serious structural issue was found in the steel columns of the St. James Building's parkade.
No one from Birchwood Terrace will end up on the streets.
In May, the NDP government announced the province will cover the housing for any resident that's been displaced, and they haven't stopped paying since.
We asked the province how much money they've spent so far and how many people are still living in hotels. They got back to us and said they didn't know. The caretaker of the building told the tenants about 60 people are going to move back in. That means this could end up costing the government over $1 million when you look at the length of time that people have been staying in the hotels, plus the cost of the hotel.
It could take years.
These tenants say it's time the owner of the building, Ladco Company, be held accountable.
They should take some responsibility for neglect. When you are owning a building, you should keep it up to standard. And they certainly haven't done that.
And that Ladco should be paying their hotel bill.
Honest to God, they should be paying the price for us. It should not be the city or the province.
Ladco declined a request for comment. They sent a notice to tenants earlier this month saying they hope some people can move back in mid-October, but they will have to pass the city's inspections before that happens. Kristen Annabelle, CBC News, Winnipeg.
That comes out into this one behind us, and that's where all the magic happens.
The magic Curtis Hebert is talking about is the green ammonia being made on his land. Hebert is the operator of R&L Acres. He's been farming since he was 12 and says one of the main ingredients needed for farming is ammonia.
Hydrous ammonia, as we call it, or NH3, we use that for nitrogen fertilizers. So it is the primary form of nitrogen fertilizer.
Roughly 80% of the world's ammonia is used in agriculture as fertilizer. Making it involves removing hydrogen from fossil fuels and has a significant impact on the environment. Now, a new process for making carbon-free green ammonia is being tested on Hebert's farm. He says green ammonia could save the environment while it saves him money on fluctuating fuel prices.
If I don't have to use fossil fuels, that's great. That's a volatility thing, right? If we can be off the grid, I don't have to worry about the prices of all those things.
Fuel Positive's green ammonia system uses hydrogen from water and nitrogen from the air. Those elements combined in this container using hydroelectricity, and the end result is carbon-free green ammonia. The Canadian company invented the containerized green ammonia production system. This gives an idea of how the process works. Fuel Positive kept the container closed to keep its new technology a secret for now. CEO Ian Clifford says one of the most important ingredients in making green ammonia is using carbon-free electricity.
One of the reasons we're starting all of this in Manitoba is specifically because it's a green grid. It's low-cost electricity.
Ammonia would be about up to here.
Mario Tenuta is a professor of soil ecology at the University of Manitoba. He says making green ammonia could have a cascading effect that will appeal to major food processors and retailers.
Very enticing for them. So yeah, this technology approach is being watched very carefully by many different groups in our food system.
Having it right on site, have less problem with supply, and hopefully, remove some of the volatility in the price.
Hebert says the system is controlled remotely and won't add to his workload. All he has to do is apply it. Mike Arsenault, CBC News, Sperling, Manitoba. Winnipeg police respond to a variety of calls, but the ones about mental health are becoming the focus. The Manitoba government is reviewing the Mental Health Act.
We've heard from police that sometimes they don't need to be called in, and we know that police are stretched.
The goal is to take some of the onus away from police and create more non-police options. Minister Bernadette Smith says the Mental Health Act hasn't been reviewed in 25 years, and they're consulting with experts about potential changes. The health liaison for Winnipeg Police Service, Inspector Helen Peters, says it supports the move. Peters said WPS received 234 Mental Health Act forms from May to August, which puts onus on police to respond to mental health calls.
The police officer is the only person with the authority then to detain a person involuntarily by way of a form that has been issued by a judge or a justice of the peace.
Peters says changes to the act could allow police to share the workload with people trained for mental health calls so police can focus on crime and investigations.
One response does not meet the need, and instead of looking to remove responses, what we will hope for is that addition of different types of responses to meet different needs.
The Coalitions of Families Affected by Police Violence is a group looking for change in the system. It's advocated for the family of James Woods, who died in January after being restrained by police. Megan Daniel says Toronto rolled out a crisis team pilot project with no police involved.
They diverted 78% of the calls received from 911 with no police involvement. And so I think that that's an enormous success.
The province says the review on the Mental Health Act is going to take some time, but didn't give specifics on how it will work. Mike Arsenault, CBC News, Winnipeg.
When Befakadu Abitao saw Winnipeg Police Patrol Sergeant Jeffrey Norman park his SUV outside Kokeb Restaurant on Edmonton Street this past February, he immediately grabbed his cell phone and started recording. Then he went outside and told Ayele Abea to move his car because he suspected what would happen next. Abitao says for months he believed Norman targeted the back lane next to the Ethiopian restaurant, ticketing people who illegally parked there.
He's always there, hunting purposely to find if someone is parking in the back lane.
But on this day, what should have been a simple parking ticket ended up with Abea and his friend Tamarat Sise getting arrested. Abea was driving for Uber that day when he says he had the urgent need to use the bathroom. So he parked his car in the back lane and ran into a nearby convenience store. When he came out, he saw Sise and stopped to say hi. But when he went back to his car, Norman approached and asked for his driver's license.
I said, "Hi, officer. Have I committed any crime?" And then I try and explain, but he wasn't willing to listen to my story. And he said, "I need to see your ID." And then I asked him, "Is this a crime scene? I don't see a police tape. I don't see a crime."
Sise and Abitao were mouthing off to Norman during the incident, and at one point, he asked them to move away.
Please, move over there. I have a right to continue. No, you do have a right, but you don't have the right to interfere with.
We didn't interfere. I am not interfering.
Move over there, please.
I am not interfering.
Okay. Move over there, please. Continue recording, but move over there.
The men didn't move. Norman called for backup. Then he arrested Abea for not handing over his license and came back to arrest Sise. Both were told they had obstructed a police officer. Norman also seized Abitao's phone for evidence. Abitao says the men weren't doing anything wrong and were just frustrated with what they feel is Norman targeting their community.
He just feels like he's very powerful in that uniform. He forgot that the responsibility that he carries with that uniform. I'm sure there are very good police officers who are doing their job to protect and make this community safe. By him, he has to stop.
Winnipeg police say the operator of the garbage truck flagged down Norman because they couldn't access the bin in the back lane, and that's why he was in the area. But the men say it doesn't explain the other times Norman stopped by to ticket food delivery drivers who also parked in the same spot.
I'm here in free country.
supposed to be free country. I'm here. He's going to be personally attacking our community.
Norman has been sued 10 times dating back to 2005. The allegations ranging from assault and wrongful arrest to unnecessary use of a taser. Brandon Trask is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Law at the University of Manitoba, who used to be a Crown attorney in Nova Scotia. He says Winnipeg police need to do more to address concerns about Norman.
This in isolation, probably realistically wouldn't lead to anything, but this in tandem with all of the other allegations and all of the other legal actions involving Jeffrey Norman, I think at some point somebody at the Winnipeg Police Service has to stop and ask, is this who we want representing us as an agency, right? Is this somebody we want as a public face of our allegedly community building policing agency?
Abea and Cisse were processed and detained, then released 4 hours later on a promise to appear in court. The Crown ended up not authorizing the charges, but the whole ordeal left them traumatized.
I was confused, to be honest with you. I did not know what was going on. Never in my life dreamed this will happen to me in Canada.
After 5 months, Abitao finally got his phone back. He has since filed a complaint with the Law Enforcement Review Agency, but has no faith they'll do anything about Norman. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Today, Manitoba's health minister announced by the end of next year, self-referral mammograms will be available to women starting at age 45, with a goal to lower that age to 40 sometime after that. Now, right now in this province, women 50 to 74 who don't have any symptoms can call Breast Check and schedule a screening mammogram every 2 years. The self-referral process means you don't need a healthcare provider to refer you. Dr. Donna Turner is the Chief of Population Oncology at Cancer Care Manitoba.
The science is really emerging in this area, and we are watching what is happening. In Manitoba right now, we're not seeing a big increase in cancer in women in their 40s. What this will allow is for women to find their cancers early. It doesn't prevent cancer when you find it early, but you do get a chance to find it early.
There has been a push to lower the age people can self-refer for screening. Turner says this allows women in their 40s to start having the conversation about what's right for them. She points out there's a larger number of false positives in that age group, leading to further testing before learning they don't have cancer. Something that Turner says is really important in all of this: if you notice something isn't right, don't wait for screening. See your provider.
If you know your breasts and you know what looks right, if you notice puckering or dimpling or bleeding from the nipples, anything that is just not right for you, those are things that you need to look for.
I mentioned earlier, this change isn't happening right away. Turner says it takes time to get the system ready to support more screening and everything that goes with it. Here's an example. Turner says right now there's about 16 technologists that are part of the screening program. They're looking to add 4 or 5 more. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
For a time, walking was something Christian Swan could only dream about. The 46-year-old has diabetes. His ankle and foot were amputated more than 2 years ago after an infection.
I was dreaming I was walking. And if that sounds crazy, that's how it happened for me. I dreamt I was walking, and eventually I got to the stage where I started walking.
Swan learned to walk again with the help of a prosthetic leg. His amputation, likely one of the cases in a recent report. The Canadian Institute for Health Information found between 2020 and 2023, Manitoba saw more than double the national average of diabetes-associated leg amputations. It says Manitoba also saw more ankle and below amputations. Swan was on a trip when a foot wound developed. He visited hospital and was cleared to drive home. He doesn't know if it was the long drive back to Winnipeg or wait in hospital here that infection set in.
The toe started turning black, like it was crazy. It was just like you knew that something was going on, and then they broke the news to me.
You'll see that this toe is gone.
Dr. John Emble works with Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre Limb Preservation Program. He says people with diabetes are at high risk for foot wounds and infections. He says the program sees upwards of 3,000 Manitoba patients a year. Almost all have diabetes.
And they're with us as long as it takes, and then we continue to follow people for life.
He says early detection and early intervention are key in trying to reduce the number of amputations.
If you can prevent end-stage complications, such as lack of sensation in the feet and suboptimal blood supply to the feet, you can prevent many of those complications and you can prevent the amputations.
The hospital had done their scans.
Darlene Tunney lost toes on her right foot. Now she's learning to live with an amputation below her left knee. Complications came after she went into hospital with pneumonia last November.
My left leg was my good leg. So it was a surprise to find that it had gone black and needed amputation, because I tried to check pretty daily my feet after losing my toe.
She says losing her independence and relying on others, like home care, is difficult. She cautions people to take diabetes seriously.
You can't play around with this disease. It will kill you.
She'd like to see more places like Uville Diabetes Centre where people can see a nutritionist, a counselor, or nurse all under one roof. Swan says he didn't know enough.
People have reached out to me, asked questions, and then the next thing you know, they're in the hospital and they're getting treated for a similar situation.
Now he shares his story to help others. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
When an elderly woman picked up the phone back in 2022, she thought it was her grandson on the other end. He was in trouble and asking for money because he'd been arrested. She went to the bank and took out $9,000 in $100 bills. She took the bills back to her house, then handed them over to a woman who showed up at her door. Turns out it wasn't her grandson on the phone, and the grandmother wasn't the only one being targeted. In a Winnipeg court this week, the Ontario woman who picked up the cash from the grandmother was sentenced to a year of house arrest. Gabrielle Paradis was what prosecutors called a money mule in a scheme where 9 elderly people lost nearly $90,000. The victims got most of that cash back, but the judge talked about how they still all live with the shock of it. The judge said, "The emotional impact, the feeling perhaps of embarrassment of falling for this sort of scam, and having their confidence shaken and their family's confidence shaken are implications that go well beyond just the money." Another Ontario woman charged in the same scheme got 18 months of house arrest earlier this year. But court heard we still don't know who is behind the scam. Caitlin Gowerluck, CBC News, Winnipeg.
It's a sentencing a Winnipeg courtroom heard was a long time coming. Judge Raymond Wyan told how this case had a deep, emotional and grave impact on the victims. In handing down the 20-year sentence, he also mentioned how the case impacted him deeper and longer than usual. He felt anger and pain and wanted to ensure he came up with a fair and just sentence related to his emotions. Wyan told court, "This case has evoked strong feelings of anger in people, and these have had life-altering consequences to the victims and their family and friends." He says the impact on victims is significant. The effects of these crimes have not diminished, he says. 54-year-old Kelsey McKay pleaded guilty last year to 11 charges, 9 counts of sexual assault and 2 charges of luring. He was arrested in 2022 in connection with the abuse of 9 former football players, most between 15 and 18 years old, who he coached between 2013 and 2016. He worked as a teacher and coached football at Vincent Marcy Collegiate and Churchill High School for more than 2 decades. All his victims were former players of the school who were minors at that time. The judge told court there was a demonstrated pattern and the offences were predatory. Court heard McKay manipulated his victims psychologically and had control, power and authority over them. He mentioned all harm done was life-altering and catastrophic. Zubina Ahmed, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Manitoba, my dear, sweet Manitoba, look at what we have done here tonight.
That was 1 year ago. Wab Kinew's election as premier was also historic, the first First Nations premier of any Canadian province. A year later, Kinew and his team are celebrating.
We bet that Manitobans were sick and tired of division and wedge politics and nastiness in your legislature. And we instead chose to focus on healthcare, on affordability, on a message of bringing Manitobans together from all walks of life.
Earlier this week, Kinew reflected on his year in office. He stuck to his talking points, like blaming the former progressive conservative government.
It will take us years to fix the damage that Heather Stephenson and Brian Pallister caused in healthcare.
And he held the Tories responsible for a deficit approaching $2 billion.
It's a much narrower path to balance, right?
Yet under the NDP, some big pressing issues are still afflicting Manitoba. ER wait times higher than a year ago. And despite a high deficit, the government surrendered hundreds of millions of dollars by scrapping the gas tax. But Kinew disagrees his government hasn't done enough.
Whether it's healthcare, education, ensuring that the economy moves forward with that cut to the provincial gas tax, being there to stand up for reproductive freedom. We've done a lot this first year.
But he acknowledges there's a lot more to do.
That's why when we made our commitments on healthcare, we said it was a 4-year plan. In some cases, an 8-year plan.
A political expert says Manitobans are cutting the NDP some slack.
So there seems to be some grace period being granted by Manitobans that the government's entitled to more time to demonstrate results.
In fact, a recent poll suggests the government's becoming more popular.
This seems to be beyond what most parties would get even during 12 months.
But Paul Thomas says the biggest challenges are ahead, like ending chronic homelessness and balancing the budget in 3 years.
They're leaving these hard choices deeper into their 4-year term in office. And so that's the last point at which you want to be telling people the unfortunate news that we're going to have to raise taxes because we didn't control our spending in the prior years.
The opposition expects the NDP's shine to wear off.
People are starting to realize that, hey, you know what, their wait times have not gotten any better in healthcare. Their schools aren't getting built.
For now, Kinew is counting on Manitobans' patience. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg. To build more housing for people who need it, the Manitoba government wants businesses to step up. The Business Council of Manitoba says companies want to help.
This is about giving back. So it's not about what's in it for the business. This is about our community.
That community, the Premier says, is struggling with homelessness and crime. On Tuesday, Wab Kinew announced a new way to help get people off the street, a real estate investment trust.
We are going to be unlocking the power of business to help us grapple with some of these challenges.
Starting with $10 million from the province, the trust will then attract investment from the private sector. The trust will then use this money to leverage funding from other sources like federal grants. Kinew expects the nonprofits currently trying to build housing to welcome the support.
What we're saying with this project is, well, no, let's take your expertise and meet you with people who've made their careers out of project management and haggling with contractors.
The head of Shiloh Mission says she'll gladly take the help.
One of the challenges that we face a lot with funding is that you need some funding to get in the door with other funders.
The leader of End Homelessness Winnipeg is optimistic about the future.
We need to pool resources and we need to do things more efficiently if we're ever going to address and end chronic homelessness.
The trust is slated to build at least 3 new housing projects in the next year. One more step towards the NDP's promise of eradicating chronic homelessness in the next 7 years. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
If you're like me and have always wanted to see the auroras in our province and still haven't, well, listen up. Our next guest says that aurora chasing is in easy mode. Just consider what many folks saw up last night. Reds, greens, purples, all sorts of colors. Justin Anderson is one of the moderators of the Manitoba Aurora and Astronomy Facebook group, and he joins us by Zoom. Hi, Justin.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You were out by Nipawa last night. What did it look like?
It was actually a really great show. Every aurora display is different in every way. Some of them really bright dancing, some of them are colorful, and last night was one of the most red show we've seen this year, if not this entire 11-year cycle. So it was a really great night. You could see the reds to the naked eye, like even if you were driving, some people were able to see them, and on the camera, they looked incredible.
What's your sense of why it was so red?
What happens is the particles in the atmosphere that come in, they hit every different molecules in our atmosphere, like oxygen, high altitude oxygen, nitrogen, helium, different elements, and it hit high altitude oxygen, which causes red. And in that time, there was just enough high altitude oxygen, not too much, but just a perfect amount to cause a really, really bright red.
I know you smiled when I said that, or it's aurora chasing easy mode. What did you mean by that? Why did you describe it that way?
Yeah, I mean, 15 years ago, if you wanted to chase the Northern Lights, you had to go on to NASA's website, look at their data, understand what the satellites are reading, and try to be able to capture it in that moment. Today, there's a lot of us like myself out there that love the Northern Lights, that we want to just not only capture it, but share it with others. And that's what the Manitoba Aurora and Astronomy group is there for. What we do is we'll post a thread in the group that says, hey, chances are looking really good tonight. And then you can see people in the community, they can reply and say, oh, I'm in Winnipeg and I'm seeing it, or I'm in Brandon and I'm seeing it. And it really helps other people realize that, okay, well, I'm in Morden and someone's seen it, I can go see it as well. So it's a really great resource for the entire province of Manitoba to come together and have 70,000 people there saying, I'm seeing it right now, you should too. So those threads are posted every night that the aurora looks really good or the data looks really good. And what happens is we'll also post a notification in our Instagram and Facebook channels, and that'll send a push notification right to your phone saying, hey, chances are good, take a look, here's the link to the Facebook group, and then you could follow along for yourself.
And you're not talking about...
Makes life a little bit easier.
It's not just like a couple dozen folks, like you have hundreds of folks and potentially thousands of folks. I mean, how many do you figure were out who are just part of your group, following your group, who were out last night? What's your sense based on what people have been posting?
As far as the engagement looks, it looks right around the 8,000 to 10,000 mark right now. But a lot of people go out and don't post photos or don't take photos and just enjoy it. So it's hard to say. It could have been more than that. It could have been a little less than that. But it does look like right around the 8 to 10,000 mark is what saw our thread and kind of got involved last night.
I'm looking at one of the photos from one of your contributors, showing a photo of the Centre of Canada sign, and just above it is this like beautiful red. What kinds of reactions have you been seeing from folks as they post or as they talk to you or they message you? What's your sense of how excited people are and why they're excited?
One of my favorite things I get is I'll get messages from people like friends of mine, and people in the community will message me and say, hey, the aurora's out, and I'm already out taking photos. So there's a lot of people that will send me messages and say, hey, look. And last night was really special because you were able to see it with your naked eye, which sometimes the aurora is there to the naked eye, sometimes it's not as good. Last night was incredible. So a lot of people are really excited for that reason. And just a ton of people, shockingly got to see the aurora for the first time, which we've seen it probably about 5 or 6 huge shows this year already. So a lot of people have been seeing it for the first time or their second time, and that's usually when the addiction starts. So that's when people go, okay, I'm not missing another one. And that's what claimed me.
Do you expect to have more of these sorts of shows, or was last night a one-time thing?
Oh, it's not a one-time thing at all. So we're in the peak of a solar maximum right now, which means the sun is really active. And for people that don't know, the sun is what causes the northern lights. So as the
those
sun
solar
gets more
flares,
active,
right?
Yeah, exactly. So as the sun gets active, we get more activity on the Earth. And right now the sun is maximum. It's the most active it's going to be. And what people don't realize is the back half, the lower end of maximum, the next 2 to 3 years is generally when the biggest shows of the year come, or the 11-year cycle comes. So a lot of people will remember 2003 as a great year, 2017 as a great year, and 2024 is currently the maximum. So we do anticipate 25, 26, 27 to be really good. And Manitoba is one of the great locations where even if we're not in maximum, we get incredible northern lights.
And like you said, follow your Facebook page / Instagram page, because that's where you'll be sending those alerts.
Exactly, yeah. It's on our Instagram and it's also on our Facebook. And the most important thing is to go out with high hopes and low expectations. And that's the name of my business.
It's the best way to do it. Justin, appreciate you making time today. Thank you. And happy looking up there during nighttime. Take care.
Take care.
Justin Anderson, one of the moderators of the Manitoba Aurora and Astronomy Facebook group. I'm sure there's another way of saying happy looking up there. We'll figure it out.
Now, as I just mentioned, when you're thinking of your next vacation, heading out to a farm might not be the first on your list, but Travel Manitoba hopes to change that. The federal government is putting $250,000 toward creating a new agritourism corridor between Manitoba and Saskatchewan. Jackie Tuda is Travel Manitoba's Vice President of Destination Management, and she joins us live in studio. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you with this announcement?
Oh, we're very excited about this announcement. It's something that we have behind the scenes been really interested in, have identified as a priority, and really see it as such a great opportunity.
So in broad strokes, what's the vision for an agritourism corridor? What does that look like?
Well, there's definitely a lot of work to do, and part of what this involves is the development of a strategy, which will include defining that vision, as well as development of an implementation plan, and an investment plan will also be part of that as well.
And we know Manitoba has lots of agriculture.
You bet.
So why is Manitoba a good place to offer agritourism? How do those work together?
Well, we have such a strong agriculture base, as you're saying. We have a lot of expertise here. We have a very strong, robust industry, and it just makes a lot of sense for us to capitalize on those assets and build upon them. We also have great tourism assets here. There's already some existing agritourism operators in the area. We want to build them up. We want to identify new opportunities for them. And so there's definitely a lot of room to grow.
What does that look like in terms of maybe what exists now in Manitoba, as you're mentioning, or in other countries that do agritourism? What are some examples if folks are having a hard time kind of picturing what agritourism is?
Well, I think we have some work to do on like how broad of a scope this is. So certainly there's kind of the leisure travel component, which is, what you described, visiting a farm. Could also be a culinary experience where a restaurant is sourcing a lot of their ingredients locally or growing a lot of their ingredients. It could be something like that. It could be a festival where you're getting to sample and reflect upon the harvest of that area. It could be a farmer's market. Could be something like that. The other piece of it is more the technical side of it. And so, as you may be aware, there's already lots of people that come to our province to go to various ag events that are part of the industry or have an interest in the industry. And so there's that component to it as well. How can we kind of enhance those visits that are already taking place from that technical side?
Do you see this as an opportunity to maybe open up Manitoba and certain areas that are very agricultural based to tourism that haven't really been looked at as tourist destinations before?
Absolutely. So we certainly see this as a really big opportunity for some rural areas, for them to see increased visitation, for them to expand on, some of those, existing economic drivers that are already there, but really expand on that and give them other opportunities. So Absolutely, that's part of it.
So what kind of tourists do you hope to attract with this program? Are you thinking staycationers or bringing people from outside of Manitoba?
I think there's opportunities for both. I think certainly getting people to travel more around the region is going to be a big part of this, getting Winnipeggers to look outside of the city to see what there is to offer, get them to travel a little further, get them to spend the night somewhere. But I also think there's an opportunity for what we call the fly drive market. So people flying in, spending a few days and traveling around or, moving on through the corridor to another destination. So moving on into Saskatchewan to, experience what that province also has to offer for agritourism.
You talked about the culinary side of things just a little bit. What sort of opportunities would be there for restaurant owners and even producers?
Well, I think there's kind of, we're not going to know until we kind of go through this whole process, but there's a few different sides to this that we see. One is like really expanding on the development of the industry, but then there's going to be a marketing component to this as well. So drawing more attention to those culinary operators that already exist out there. So there's going to be that piece of it as well, just a heightened awareness. There may be supports that come to light to help some of these businesses grow and develop. We also see potentially, and we haven't done any of the consultations on this yet, but we do actually potentially see some opportunities for Indigenous tourism. There are already, as you may be aware, a number of restaurants in the city and in other parts of the province that are Indigenous owned and are focused on, ingredients that come, from the land. And so I think there's a great opportunity there as well, not just for culinary, but for other things also.
And I can't imagine that this conversation is happening without talking about the economic benefit this brings to Manitoba for agricultural tourism. What do you think this could offer smaller communities in our province?
Yeah, definitely. I would see it as a big opportunity for smaller communities that already have agriculture as a big part of their industry, which is, a lot of communities in Manitoba. So definitely, that chance to, take what they already have and make it something, bigger and better and draw those visitors to that region.
Have you been in conversation with, is there a Tourism Saskatchewan? Does that exist?
Yes, yeah. They're
amazing.
Absolutely
What are you hearing from them?
Yeah, so we're partnered with them on this. We actually work jointly with them to submit this proposal into Destination Canada. And we've worked with them a bit already. They're very collaborative and we work well with them. So that is part of what is going to really make this work. And we have already connected with a few of the key communities along the corridor and some of the key associations that would be involved in this as well. And they're very much in support. And so the next step now is to kind of broaden that and reach out to more folks and see who else wants to be part of this initiative.
Well, Jackie, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm excited to see how this corridor plays out and what it looks like in the future.
Well, thank you very much for having me here today. Thank you.
Jackie Tuda is Travel Manitoba's Vice President of Destination Management.
Thank you for watching the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. For the latest breaking news and top stories, download the CBC News app.
As we approach the one-year anniversary of October 7th, it feels as if things are only getting worse in the Middle East. And what we've seen all this past year is that what happens on the other side of the world really impacts communities here in Manitoba. In the midst of all this pain and fear is real polarization on this issue. And it's against this very bleak backdrop that I am joined by two Winnipeggers, one Palestinian and one Jewish, who are talking to each other and really want to create a space for dialogue between their communities. Ramzi Zaid is the president of the Canadian Palestinian Association of Manitoba. Salam, Ramzi.
Alaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Emet Eviata was born in Israel and is one of the founding members of a new organization called Manitoba Friends of Standing Together. Shalom, Emet.
Shalom. Thanks for having me.
Thank you to both of you. I've literally been wanting to have a conversation like this on the show for 10 months. So I really appreciate both of you for coming on and being brave enough to have this conversation during this very kind of polarized time. So thank you to both of you. You two are at the start of your relationship with each other, and I want you to take us through that because you met kind of properly a few weeks ago, one evening at Vimy Ridge Park. It was actually the first kind of meeting of this new organization, Manitoba Friends of Standing Together. So Amet, tell us about what the goal of this organization is and why you wanted to start something like this in Winnipeg.
So let me start by telling you about Standing Together, because we are the friends of Standing Together. Standing Together actually only exists in Israel-Palestine. It's a grassroots organization, and it is different from all the other myriad peace organizations there in that it's the only one that is, as far as I know, which is actually binational in its leadership. It has Jewish Israeli leaders, and it has Palestinian citizens of Israel in the leadership. And you'll always see them together. Whenever they travel or give any sort of official statement, they're always together. And that makes them very unusual, especially in these times. And they were founded in 2015 with the goal of struggling for full civil rights and equality for the Palestinian citizens of Israel, who are not treated necessarily as in the same level. And, of course, with October 7th and everything that happened there, the atrocities, the kidnappings, everything else, they had to pivot, of course. And then, of course, with the attack on Gaza, they really had to shift their attention because there was so much going on. And they've been very busy with humanitarian aid. They just had this huge campaign to collect food and so on from the Palestinian citizens of Israel towns, because they have had to stay very quiet because they are under some sort of repression. And but they were able to come out in their thousands and donate to help their brothers and sisters in Gaza. And they thought they would send one truck. They're now up to 400. Now, we are here in Winnipeg, and you might say, well, okay, that's amazing that they're doing that. What are you doing here? So one thing that Standing Together has done is to develop a network of international chapters of Friends of Standing Together from the UK and Belgium to Sydney, mostly North America, but it's interesting because there are like 5 or 6 chapters in Canada, and there's not 60 in the U.S., so we are disproportionate.
Yeah, so you started one in Winnipeg.
I did start one in Winnipeg, and it has two main goals.
Yeah.
So it's early in the morning. One of them, of course, is to support Standing Together with awareness, with fundraising, etc. But the other thing is to create a space where we can talk with each other, because just like Standing Together works together, we want to work together because really, I think we are both facing a common enemy in what's happening in the world. And if they keep us fighting with each other, that's where we're really all going to lose.
So Ramsey, you attended this first meeting. Why did you want to attend?
I was really intrigued with the idea of Standing Together, and I had heard a lot of great things about Emmet. So I wanted to go and have a conversation and see what the group was all about and see where this could lead. It's something that I've wanted to do always, for the last few months, and we actually tried to get a few people together, but it didn't happen. So, this is another opportunity. So,
how did that first meeting go, Ramsey?
It went well for the most part. We had some heated discussions, which was, we knew that was going to happen, and it would probably happen again, right? But I think that those heated discussions are necessary, right, for us to move forward together.
I want to get into some of the topics around those heated discussions. How did the meeting end?
It ended very well. I think, like I said, we had some heated discussions, and we all, shook hands. Some of us gave hugs, and we parted ways, and we all, agreed to come back to another meeting and have more discussions. So, I think that's very positive.
You got through it.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's talk about what caused some of that tension or discomfort. What was it?
I think it was a lot based around terminology, right? different words mean different things for different people, and that's kind of what stemmed it all. But I mean, it's going to happen, right? And we knew it was going to happen. We came in there knowing that we weren't going to agree on everything, and that's what's so great about it, though.
What was one word that caused particular
I think one of the words was genocide, right? That people disagreed on. For Palestinians, genocide is a tragedy. It's something that's terrible. And for the Israeli Jewish folks, it means something completely different. So, and that conversation, I think probably 20 minutes, half an hour, we spent kind of debating. So,
what does it mean for the Jewish community, that word genocide? Emmet?
Again, not a monolith. It means different things to different people. We had one person at that meeting who said that as far as he was concerned, there was only one genocide, and that was the Holocaust, which is, I completely disagree with. I mean, like what happened in Rwanda. So there's a lot of conversation both within the group and also within the other groups. And standing together themselves do not use that word, but it is a strategic choice. And it's not because they don't think that's what's happening. It's because, again, their Palestinian members are under a repressive regime, I want to say. That's going to get me into trouble. But they are, if they speak up, they are in danger of losing their jobs, of being expelled from their schools, and so on. And so they have to be very careful with their language, and they have asked us to be very careful with our language, because if I'm standing here and I say, well, as a representative of the Friends of Standing Together, I think that what happened in Gaza is a genocide, that could have repercussions for them there. And so that is what I am mostly concerned about in terms of language. The other thing about language is that one of the things we're trying to do is to help people who are struggling with the cognitive dissonance, because the word genocide is also an indictment. And if people are sitting with if they accept that this is a genocide and this is something that they support, that means they supported a genocide. So one solution to this is to say it's not a genocide. The myth, right? There was just a talk about that recently. So one possibility is to just deny. The other possibility is to move themselves. And maybe they won't move all the way. It doesn't matter, but they'll move a little bit. But if we start by saying genocide, they're going to close down. There was no possibility of anybody moving, changing their minds, releasing some of that cognitive dissonance. It's a very painful thing to do, changing your mind.
I want to get your response to that in just a second, Ramsey. But just for context for our audience, the charge that Israel is committing genocide on Palestinians in Gaza is currently before the International Court of Justice. Israel denies this. But Ramsey, I want to get your response to this strategic decision that Standing Together is making, not to use that word for those reasons that
yes, and that
outlined.
kind of what caused the long or the half an hour debate.
Sure.
Palestinians in Gaza are losing. They're being killed by the thousands, right? So for us, or for a lot of people in Palestine, the word genocide isn't really strong enough, some would say. So I completely understand that some people would want to be careful using that word, and the group Standing Together doesn't want to use that word because they're worried about repercussions back home. But for us, we need to call it how we see it, and that's one of the things that had the argument going, is because for us it is a genocide, and we need to call it a genocide. We wouldn't want to call Holocaust something else. The Holocaust was a genocide, and you call it as you see it. And if people don't like it, well, that's the problem.
Mm-hmm. So, Ramsey, you went to the first meeting and you said you're open to coming back to more meetings.
Absolutely.
But you haven't officially joined Standing Together. So what's holding you back?
Well, like I said, it was just the first meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And me and Emmet, we did meet alone again. We had a great cup of coffee and a cookie, and we had a great conversation. And we just need to find out more about the organization and how we can work together. I'm not saying we won't work together, but at just what capacity, right? So I think in time we will do something together.
But what's at stake? Why is there so much on your shoulders that will hold you back?
When we do work together, we need to, we can't sugarcoat things, right? We have to call things out the way it is, and so that people are comfortable going there and they're not thinking, okay, well, if I go there, I have to hold back. I can't say what's on my mind. I can't say what's in my heart.
I want to talk about your one-on-one conversation because after the Vimy Ridge event, you two did go out for coffee, I think, last week.